Think you're tough. Prove it. The giant man laughed so loudly that the entire diner went silent. Even the cooks behind the grill stopped moving for a second. Sally stood there holding a coffee pot in one hand and a small notepad in the other. Her uniform was stained from a 12-hour shift, her hair was tied up in a messy knot, and there was exhaustion in her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. But she said nothing. She simply looked at the man sitting in the corner booth like she had already learned long ago that arguing with men like him only made things worse. The customers kept their heads down. Nobody wanted trouble, especially not trouble connected to Victor Mendez. Everybody in the city knew his name. Nightclubs, casinos, construction companies, debt collections, people whispered that he owned half the city and controlled the other half through fear. Politicians shook his hand in public and denied knowing him in private. Police officers looked the other way when his black cars rolled through town. And tonight, Victor was drunk, loud, and looking for entertainment. I asked for fresh coffee 5 minutes ago, he said, smirking while his bodyguards laughed behind him. Sally walked over quietly and poured the coffee into his cup. Her hands were steady even though her heart was racing. Sorry for the wait, sir, she whispered. Victor looked at her name tag and grinned. Sally, he said slowly, you always this nervous? She forced a small smile. Just trying to do my job. One of the bodyguards grabbed a French fry from another customer's plate and laughed. The old man at the table said nothing. Nobody ever said anything around Victor. Sally knew that too well. 3 months earlier, her younger brother Ethan had disappeared after refusing to pay money to one of Victor's men. The police called it a runaway case. Sally knew better. She spent every night searching streets, calling hospitals, begging for information, but nobody talked. Fear had sealed every mouth in the city. And now the same man connected to her brother's disappearance sat in front of her, laughing while drinking coffee she served him. Victor suddenly tossed $100 bill onto the table. Tell you what, he said loudly, I hear you used to fight. Sally froze. One of the cooks looked toward her nervously. That was a long time ago, she answered quietly. Victor leaned back. Come on. The boys told me you used to do martial arts or something. You don't look so dangerous now. The bodyguards laughed again. Sally kept her eyes low. Years ago, before life crushed her spirit, she had trained in mixed martial arts with her father. He believed every girl should know how to defend herself. After he died and medical bills buried the family in debt, Sally quit fighting and started working double shifts instead. Victor pointed at her. Think you're tough. Prove it. The diner became painfully quiet. Sally felt every eye on her. Her face burned with humiliation, but she swallowed the feeling. I'm working, she said softly. Victor smiled like a predator. That's what I thought. He pushed his chair back and stretched his arms. You know what I hate? People pretending to be stronger than they are. Then suddenly he grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her wince. The coffee pot slipped from her hand and shattered across the floor. Several customers gasped. Sally tried pulling away, but Victor tightened his grip. Look at you, he mocked. All that attitude gone now. One of the bodyguards stood near the door to block anyone from leaving. Sally's breathing became shallow. Memories flooded her mind, hospital bills, her missing brother, sleepless nights, fear, humiliation, years of staying quiet just to survive. Victor leaned closer. You should smile more, he whispered cruelly. Then something changed in Sally's eyes. It happened so quickly that almost nobody noticed at first. The fear disappeared. Not completely, but enough. Enough for something buried deep inside her to wake up again. She slowly looked at Victor's hand gripping her wrist. Then she looked directly into his eyes for the first time that night. Calmly. Quietly. Victor smirked. There she is. Sally spoke in a low voice. Let go. The diner held its breath. Victor laughed again and squeezed harder. Or what? And that was the moment everything changed. In one fast movement, Sally twisted her wrist free exactly the way her father had taught her years ago. Before Victor could react, she stepped sideways, grabbed his arm, and slammed him face first onto the table so hard that plates crashed onto the floor. The entire diner exploded with shock. One bodyguard rushed toward her, but Sally spun and kicked his knee sideways. He screamed and collapsed instantly. The second bodyguard reached into his jacket, but the cook behind the counter smashed a frying pan across his hand before he could pull anything out. Customers jumped back in panic. Victor staggered to his feet, furious now instead of amused. Blood dripped from his nose. "You stupid little," he shouted, charging toward her. Sally moved carefully, breathing slowly, focused now. Years of pain had sharpened her patience. Victor swung wildly, but he was drunk and angry. Sally ducked under the punch and drove her elbow into his ribs. The huge man groaned. Then she swept his legs from under him. His massive body crashed against the diner floor. Silence. Complete silence. Victor Mendez, the untouchable king of fear, was lying on the dirty tiles staring up at the ceiling while a waitress stood over him breathing hard. Nobody could believe what they were seeing. Sally herself looked shocked for a moment. Not because she defeated him, but because for the first time in years, she no longer felt helpless. Victor tried getting up again, but suddenly police sirens screamed outside the diner. Everyone froze. Victor smiled weakly from the floor. "You're dead," he whispered. "Those cops work for me." But when the doors opened, the officers who entered were not local police. Dark jackets, federal badges, serious faces. One agent walked straight toward Victor. "Victor Mendez," he announced, "you are under arrest for racketeering, extortion, kidnapping, and conspiracy." The entire diner stared in disbelief. Victor's face drained of color. "What?" he muttered. Then the agent looked toward Sally. "Miss Carter." Sally nodded slowly. The agent softened his tone. "Your brother Ethan is alive." Sally stopped breathing for a second. "What?" she whispered. "We found him 2 hours ago in a warehouse outside the city. Weak, but alive." Tears instantly filled her eyes. Her knees almost gave out beneath her. For months she had prepared herself for the worst. For months she believed she would never see him again. Victor began shouting at the agents, threatening lawyers and politicians, but nobody listened anymore. The fear around him was broken. Completely broken. Customers who once avoided eye contact now stared openly at him with disgust. The old man whose fries had been stolen earlier spat on the floor near Victor's shoes. One by one, people started speaking. Quietly at first, then louder. Stories of threats, beatings, missing money, fear, years of silence finally cracking apart. Sally stood there trembling while paramedics entered to check her injuries. One young officer handed her a phone. "Your brother wants to talk to you." Her hands shook violently as she lifted it to her ear. "Sally," Ethan's weak voice said. She burst into tears instantly. Not dramatic tears. Real ones. The kind people cry when pain leaves the body after staying there too long. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. Around her, agents dragged Victor out of the diner in handcuffs while cameras from local news stations gathered outside. The once powerful Mafia boss screamed like a desperate man, no longer a king, no longer untouchable. Just another criminal finally facing justice. Weeks later, the diner became strangely famous. People traveled across town just to meet the waitress who stood up to Victor Mendez. Reporters offered Sally interviews, television deals, even sponsorships from fighting organizations after security footage of the incident spread online. But Sally refused most of it. She returned to work quietly after Ethan recovered. One evening, the diner owner asked her why she never took the money or fame. Sally smiled softly while pouring coffee for an elderly customer. "Because being strong isn't about hurting people," she said. "It's about surviving long enough to protect the people you love." Outside the diner window, the city looked different now. Safer somehow. Lighter. Fear no longer controlled every conversation. And in the corner booth where Victor once laughed at her, a small handwritten sign now rested beside the sugar jars. It simply read, "Be careful who you humiliate. Quiet people carry the deepest strength."